It's like a dream come true, a $300 million inheritance and our own company. When the employees saw my sister-in-law Mary celebrating my father's inheritance, they began to whisper to each other. The employees were ecstatic, and Mary said triumphantly, "Please be quiet. This is the point which my husband will inherit the company and $3 million. Hearing this, one of the employees began laughing uncontrollably. "What's the deal?" Sitting beside his perplexed wife, my elder brother was reading the will from the lawyer. My brother's face turned pale as he read. "Look at this." When my brother showed her the will, she screamed. Lucy is my name. I'm 29 years old and work for my father's business. When he was young, my father had the foresight to start a business from the ground up. It's since grown to a modest-sized enterprise with many employees. Of course, soon after launching the business, he incurred debt, and even as a small child, I could imagine how difficult it must have been for my father. Even after the company grew, I wanted to help my mother, who mostly did clerical back-office work. My parents encouraged me to attend college and pursue a career of my choosing, but my dream was to work for the company that my father had worked so hard to build. That was the first thing that came to mind when I was considering my career path after graduating from high school. Bob, a veteran employee, was the first person to mentor me when I joined my father's company. Bob patiently taught me the fundamentals of business without looking at me through the lens of being the president's daughter. I was able to learn more about the company thanks to Bob. On the other hand, my brother Tom, who's just 2 years older, went to college to study management. From a young age, he was proud to tell his college friends that his father was running a business and that he would eventually take over the business. Tom's friends would ask, "What are your plans after you graduate from college, Tom? Don't you have to look for work?" "I don't need to look for work because I'll be working for my father's company. I'll eventually be the company's president, so I'll take my time gaining management experience until then." "So you're going to be the next president of the company? Then your life will be safe and secure. I'm jealous of you." One of Tom's friends remarked, "Tom, you have a younger sister as well. Isn't there going to be a fight over who's the successor?" "Younger sister? I do, but she's a high school graduate and a simple person." "That's something you say a lot." "She appears to be doing some behind-the-scenes work for the company. If I become president, I'll keep her on as long as she listens to me." My brother was blowing money and fooling around under the guise of gaining experience as a business manager. He knew that if he behaved well, his friends would flock to him. There was no end to the number of women who wanted to date him because of his position as the company's next president. My brother chose the most flamboyant and attractive woman to marry. Mary was her name. After a lavish wedding, my brother and Mary went on a honeymoon abroad, built a mansion, and began their married life together. This was all done, according to him, to obtain the status of company president. Mary appeared to be content with her life with Tom, who listened to her every wish and allowed her to enjoy all of life's luxuries. I'm sure she wouldn't be interested in a life like mine, one where I work alongside my mother as a humble backstage employee in my father's company. "Lucy, you don't look like the CEO's daughter, do you?" she asked. "You don't appear to be the daughter of the company's president." Mary would often look at me and laugh whenever we met at family gatherings. "I don't like to live a lavish lifestyle," I said. She looked at me as if I were a moron. "I feel sorry for you because you were born as the daughter of a company's president, but you have no idea how to spend money." "What?" "You live at home with your parents and you have a lot of money, so you don't need to work so hard." Beside, with your title as president's daughter, shouldn't the men be flocking to you?" My brother agreed. "I'm sure that's true. Lucy's always been very modest, so no one would imagine that her father is the president. And apparently, she treats the other employees normally. I come as a surprise. There are still many things I don't understand about my job. Many of my coworkers are better at their jobs than I am, so I can't act like a big shot," I refuted. But my brother said, astounded, "That's why you're useless. A boss should be able to stand tall so that he's not derided by his subordinates, such as his employees. Allow the other employees to handle the simple, tedious tasks. I suppose my father and I are the only bosses in this house." "You should not look down on your subordinates, no matter how powerful you are. My father, too." My brother cut me off when I tried to respond, looking annoyed and frustrated with me. He said, "A logical woman is not well liked by men." After my brother spoke up, Mary followed. "If you keep saying things like that, I'm sure you'll never get married. You should try to make yourself more appealing. Don't you agree, Tom?" "Yeah, well, when I become president, I might fire a humble employee like you," Tom said. My brother and Mary only said what they needed to say, and they quickly left. My mother, who'd remained silent during this interaction, consoled me after they had gone. She said, "You're doing an excellent job with the company, which greatly helps me and your father. Don't be concerned about what Tom says." My father nodded, a stern expression on his face. My parents had previously expressed their displeasure with my brother's ideas to his face. But after that, my brother and Mary became visibly upset and stopped visiting our house for over a month. I recalled the depressing atmosphere at the time, so I suggested to my parents, "Tom and Mary are free to say whatever they want." After that, Tom and Mary continued to live their lives as they pleased, dining lavishly at high-end restaurants and vacationing at famous resorts. The purpose was to give the impression that Tom would someday be president of my father's corporation. My father was working hard to expand his business at that time, but one night at home, he complained of chest pain. I said, "Dad, are you all right? Try and relax. I'll call an ambulance." "Lucy, get this." While we waited for the ambulance, my father pointed to a drawer and told me he had a letter for me. I quickly took the letter from the drawer. "I want you to read this. If anything happens to me, everything else is up to the lawyers," he said breathlessly before losing consciousness before the ambulance arrived. And despite being rushed to the emergency room, he died without regaining consciousness. My brother and Mary, who were away on a trip, were unable to be there for my father's death. They returned from their trip 2 days later at the conclusion of my father's funeral. Tom said, "We're just glad we arrived on time. I never imagined my father would pass away while we were on vacation." I was completely taken aback. My brother and Mary arrived at the funeral without a care in the world, making no mention of the fact that my mother and I had been left to handle the arrangements. I asked my brother about it in private so that the employees present would not hear. "Couldn't you have arrived home earlier?" "What? I couldn't because I'd already booked our return flight," my brother said, without apologizing, and then addressed the employees. "Thank you all for your help, and please, from now on, leave it to me to take my father's place in an honorable manner." Mary looked around at the employees who had quieted down in response to my brother's words, and she said admiringly, "That's exactly what Tom would do. Everyone is speechless because they're so impressed." "Right? It's only natural given my dignity." Pridefully, my brother asked, "Lucy, isn't the ceremony just about to start? Please hurry and show us the way." I was irritated by my brother's late appearance and his arrogance, but I led him, Mary, and the employees to the meal ceremony party table. My brother continued to act arrogantly as we ate. "Isn't the quality of this food questionable, Lucy? This will degrade our father's standing as president." Mother and I already discussed it, and we came to an agreement on the food. Besides, I don't want you telling me what to do. "This is why people have no idea what it means to be president." He gave orders not only to me, but also to the other employees. "Serving other people, you're pointless." I rushed to stop him after hearing him order Bob, a veteran employee, to do his bidding. "Oh, Tom, you're so bold. Don't be impolite to Bob." "What? They're rude people. Why should I be humble in front of a mere employee? These guys ought to have more regard for me, the president." Mary was also getting into the spirit of things, and she charged at me. "That's right. Stop talking down to Tom, the company's president, Lucy. If you continue to disobey him, he'll fire you. He has the authority." A man appeared just as my brother and his wife were blustering on. He said, "Please, excuse my interruption. Your father asked me to look after his inheritance." He was the lawyer my father had retained while he was still alive. Then I remembered. My father had told me shortly before his death that he had already hired a lawyer. It seemed my father had been considering his own death and had spoken with a lawyer several years before he collapsed. My brother and Mary's eyes lit up when the lawyer mentioned inheritance. They gladly welcomed the lawyer into their room. Tom said, "Thank you for attending. The sooner we complete this task, the better. Come on in." But as he spoke with the lawyer, Tom began to sob. "Wasn't my father's inheritance worth $300 million? When Mary heard this, she squealed with delight. $300 million? That much money in a company that belongs to us is a dream come true. When the employees heard this, they began to whisper. Mary triumphantly declared to the mourning employees, "Quiet. This is the moment when the company and its $300 million inheritance pass to Tom." Hearing this, one of the employees began laughing uncontrollably. "What's the deal?" My brother had received the will and was reading it next to Mary, who was wondering what the employees found so funny. My brother's face turned pale as she watched. Mary, According to the will, the entire company will be given to the eldest daughter, to Lucy. He stared at the will for some time and then began shouting, "This is not possible. This is incorrect." In a troubled tone, the lawyer said, "This is a legally enforceable will." My brother's voice became more and more choked. "What? I couldn't care less. How can Lucy become president instead of me? Perhaps Dad was simply getting old and senile. Yes, your father lacks sound judgment. A will made by a senile old man is null and void." Hearing these words, I completely snapped. I couldn't let these two people insult my late father. I couldn't let anyone, even family members, bring down my father, who was a good man until the end. Enough! My brother Tom becoming president would be even more unthinkable in my opinion. The words infuriated my brother. "What? Are you trying to tell me that I'm unfit to be president?" I responded without hesitation. "You are correct. How can you be president of this company if you've never even helped it?" "Don't be a moron. Mary and I even built a house fit for a president, and we went to great lengths to make me look the part. Do you mean building a mansion unsuitable for a man of your stature, or eating at fancy restaurants? That's not good for business. It's only money. After all, didn't Father cover the majority of the cost for the new house and extravaganza?" "How in the world would you know that?" "Just before he died, Dad left me a letter. In the letter, he detailed all the money he had spent on you and stated it would be given to you in a gift during his lifetime. As a result, your share of the estate is practically nothing." Mary panicked when she heard this. "Wait a second. Isn't this inheritance worth $300 million? Did we already spend that much? It's not fair that we got so little out of it." The employee who had just burst out laughing quickly approached Mary and informed her that $300 million comes from the company, not from personal assets. I believe all the employees here are aware of this. "Money from the company? Isn't that something that can be inherited?" I informed Mary it is indeed. The money from the company is not inheritance for the family, so I'm pretty sure my brother's share is negligible. That breaks my heart. "Oh no!" Lucy was completely taken aback. "The inheritance, $300 million. My brother stood up as if he'd had an epiphany, and he yelled at the employees. "You want your company president to be a plain woman like Lucy? You must believe I'm more qualified to be president. I have the same amount of charisma as my father." Not one of his co-workers agreed with him. Bob then took the initiative and began talking with my brother. "Your predecessor, your father, was a charismatic man who founded the company during his lifetime. However, you and he are not the same person." "What?" "What you have is arrogance, looking down on us, not charisma." "What?" My brother became enraged when the employee calmly refuted him. "Tom, you may be an employee of our company, but we, the employees, rarely see you at work." "That's because I don't have time to do any work for the company. I was too busy networking with others. I couldn't have time to do work anyone could do." "You call going on trips and fun at night networking? Isn't that all there is to say?" Bob sighed and went on. "In that regard, Lucy worked hard every day to learn more about the company while performing her unobtrusive, behind-the-scene duties." "Bob." "I sense the same sincerity in her as in your father. Lucy is the right person for the job, according to all of us at the company." The other employees nodded enthusiastically in response to his words. I was moved and responded, "Thank you very much. To be honest, I'm surprised by the suddenness of the news, but having witnessed my father's enthusiasm for the company firsthand, I care about it just as much as you do. I look forward to your continued assistance." The employees warmly applauded as I bowed deeply. Encouraged by the applause, I said firmly, "All of you here are important friends who have helped our business. Anyone who ignores them is unfit to be employee, let alone company's president. You can be fired by the president." My brother became irritated upon hearing this. "What in the world are you on about? I'm your brother." "What exactly are you on about? You even said that if you became president, you would fire me, brother." "Ugh." "I can't afford to pay a salary to an incompetent employee simply because he's family." "This is completely absurd. Someone, please speak up." With a pitiful expression on his face, he begged for assistance from those around him, but the employees gave him only cold stares. Realizing that no one was on his side, my brother and Mary fled the scene. After that, Tom lost his job and survived on the small inheritance he had received, but the funds quickly ran out. "Can you lend me money, Lucy?" I threw him to the ground. I was disgusted by my brother, who even after being fired, did not try to find a new job and was still relying on his family to help him. I told my mother flatly not to give my brother any money. His friends, who had once been so supportive, abandoned him after learning that he had lost his position as president to his sister. When Mary married my brother, she had been planning to be the wife of the company president, and not a single one of her friends seemed to sympathize with her. When their living expenses became unsustainable, my brother and his wife decided to sell their mansion. The money from selling their house may have allowed my brother and his wife to relax and resume their previous lifestyle. However, without any income, my brother and his wife's savings quickly ran out. When they had nothing left to sell, they could no longer pay their living expenses. When they finally decided to give up and work, no one would hire them because they had never worked a day in their lives. Tom was eventually able to find a part-time job at a convenience store. Now he is working at a convenience store, a job he is unfamiliar with, and has been told that his work is inadequate by other part-time employees who are much younger than he is. Mary, too, can no longer be a full-time housewife like she used to be. She has joined the part-time housewives she used to mock, and she now works as a cashier at a supermarket from morning to night for a low monthly salary. I, on the other hand, am using what I've learned from my behind-the-scenes work to help the company. Bob and the other employees have been working with me, and the company has been steadily growing. My brother's case may have actually strengthened employee unity. I vowed to continue working with my mother to grow the business in order to bring more joy to my Father in heaven.
My marriage was about 6 months old at that time. A bolt of lightning struck my otherwise mundane life. My husband forced me to take care of my father-in-law, who had become bedridden as a result of an accident. Because that was the first experience to me, I struggled with caring for my father-in-law. Then my husband said to me, "We're going to relax in Hawaii and you'll look after my father." My husband and my mother-in-law left for Hawaii, leaving me behind. They still didn't know, they had no idea what kind of tragedy their decision would cause later on. Mary is my name, and I am 30 years old. I've always enjoyed cooking, so after graduating from college, I went to work for a major restaurant chain. I am now in charge of developing new products in the planning department, 8 years after starting there. I met Tom, who later became my husband 2 years ago. I went to my favorite Japanese pub all by myself, found full that day, sat at a counter. Tom was sitting next to me. We found we were the same age through a conversation with the pub master. We had a nice chat and exchanged contacts. Tom began inviting me to dinner on a regular basis after that, and we began spending time alone together. He was upbeat and funny, and I found myself drawn to him. He appeared to be the same way, and we started dating naturally. We got married 6 months ago after a year of dating. We are currently enjoying living together in an apartment located between our workplaces. I sometimes cut corners on housework because we both have work, but Tom always smiles and says, "You don't have to be perfect at housework. I'm just happy being with you." I wish I took time to prepare dinner as well, but I'm happy just to be able to have dinner with the person I love. I believe so. Thank you, I said. Tom is always so gracious. Only to you. I like to treat the people I like nicely. I'm so happy to be your wife. Me too. I'm really happy to have a wife like you. Even 6 months after our wedding, our relationship is still so good that we have conversations like this today. I thought that our happy days would last for a long time, but then, all of a sudden, those happy days vanished. My husband was already in the living room when I got home from work that day. Normally, the first one who got home would say, "Hey." However, there was a somewhat heavy silence on that day. I nervously talked to my husband, who was on his phone with a worried face. "Tom, hey, are you alright?" "Hey, Mary, I was completely out of it." "What happened? You seem terrified." "Oh, it's just my mother called." "From your mom?" "Dad got involved in an accident." "What?" I couldn't keep up with the unexpected response, but we couldn't sit at home doing nothing. I immediately took my husband's hand. "What are you doing sitting there like that? We must visit our father now." "I'm afraid we can't." "No, why?" "There is no way we can meet him right now." "Does that imply he's not feeling well?" "Yeah, we don't have to come because Mom is going to stay with him until he gets better." "Oh no." His words made me realize there was nothing I could do at this point. I let go of his hand and sat down on the sofa. "I'm concerned if he is okay." Tom remained silent. My anxiety was heightened by his silence. My father-in-law had only recently turned 65 years old. On his days off, he had often taken good care of his health, going hiking and golfing. My husband works for my father-in-law, who owns a business. My husband must be perplexed that my father-in-law, who is also his father and the president of the company where he works, is experiencing this. I couldn't imagine him in his usual cheerful mood that day because he was so depressed. We were finally able to visit my father-in-law a week later. My father-in-law was lying in the hospital room with a powerless smile on his face. When I arrived with my husband, "Are you all right?" I asked. My father-in-law apologetically scratched his head. "Mary, I'm sorry. I apologize for causing you a concern." "I'm not upset. I'm relieved that you are safe." "I'm glad to hear that and able to speak slowly. I'm fine." "Oh, but please stay in bed for a while." My father-in-law smiled as he heard my words. I felt relieved when I saw his smile. My father-in-law suffered a spinal cord injury as a result of the accident and is still paralyzed. In terms of treatment, he would be hospitalized and undergo rehabilitation for about 2 months to assess his progress. Even after he was released from the hospital, he would require ongoing rehabilitation. Tom has decided to assume the presidency in place of his father while he is away. Although only for a short time, having my own husband as a president was unusual. My mother-in-law arrived in the hospital room while I was watching the conversation between my husband and father-in-law. She summoned me to a hospital room corner and spoke sarcastically to me. "Hey, Mary, are you sure you're not mistaken?" "I'm mistaken?" I asked. "You are, indeed. Just because Tom is president doesn't mean you can't have fun, right? Please don't take advantage of Tom." "I don't have to be concerned about that because I'm employed and well compensated." "I'm not sure. In the first place, you were aware that Tom was the boss's son. What a vile young lady!" The mother-in-law smirked and said those words matter-of-factly, but it was her imagination, not reality. I didn't realize Tom was the president's son until we were dating for a while. As a result, my mother-in-law has been sarcastic toward me since the start of our marriage. I didn't want to be misunderstood and hated her one-sidedly, so I snapped at her on the spot. "I didn't ask him for money. Tom's personality captivated me." "What? What are you on about? You speak to me as if you know who I am." "That is correct. Nothing would be misunderstood by you." "I'm not sure. Whatever you say, I will never approve of you." "Oh no." My father-in-law, perhaps noticing our conversation, and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing," my mother-in-law said, glaring at me. My mother-in-law's words and actions made it clear that she adored Tom. She probably thought I'm a woman who approached her son for money because we married after only a year of dating. Her attitude toward me has been ruthless since the moment I went to greet her at the wedding. But under that circumstances, I never expected my mother-in-law to be so sarcastic towards me. My husband also adored her troublingly. He said something like this a few days later. "Mary, you're aware that my father will be released from the hospital the month after next, right? We'll be returning to my parents' house at that time." "Wait a minute," I said. "Why are you suddenly saying so?" "That was suggested by Mom. This is a good time for us to move in together," she said. "Mom can't live with my father by herself." "But it's not easy to do that so quickly." "What are you on about? We're all in this together," Mom says to me. "That is so thankful." I was perplexed, but he stated unequivocally, "Anyway, that is a decision. Simply get your belongings packed in time for the move-in." "Wait, I won't be able to commute to work if I move to your parents' house. We had trouble finding an apartment near our workplaces." "Isn't it only 5 stops by train from my parents' house? You're very fortunate to be able to sit on the train in the morning." It appeared that my husband and mother-in-law had already decided to live together. After that, I asked my husband several times if we wanted to avoid moving in together, but they paid no attention to me. My husband became more devoted to my mother-in-law than ever before. On the other hand, his words and actions towards me became increasingly harsh. He was giving me another nagging lecture every single day. "How's the packing coming along? I won't be able to take time off work on the day of the move, so you will fill in for me, okay? You will be in charge of all household duties and Dad's care. Don't make my mother suffer." Even before the move, I was mentally overwhelmed by such remarks. The company was in the midst of a busy season, and I was juggling work and moving preparations. I was physically and mentally exhausted. 2 months later, the move was completed successfully, and my father-in-law was released from the hospital. I hardly had time to breathe, but I started a new job as a caregiver of my father-in-law. I got up at 4 a.m. to prepare breakfast and do laundry at the same time. Following that, I flew to my father-in-law to give him a morning massage and change his clothes. I had to finish breakfast before my husband and mother-in-law did, and once I was done, I helped my father-in-law with his meals. I finally left for work after everyone had finished their breakfast. Despite all of my caregiving and housework, my mother-in-law was not pleased. She would always try to prevent me from going to work in the morning. "Mary, do you have a minute?" I apologized to mother-in-law. "I have to leave right now." "What are you on about? I'd like to make a complaint about your breakfast. That is why I am speaking to you." "When I get back, I'll reach out to you. Now I'm going." "Don't argue with me, just sit there." "No." "Come on, take a seat." My headache began with my mother-in-law's yelling. I started having heart palpitations and headaches whenever my husband or mother-in-law gave me an unreasonable sermon at the time. However, responding to them was counterproductive. The quickest way to complete tasks was to remain silent. Because of my mother-in-law's sermons, I was always barely on time for work. My coworkers were concerned about my tardiness because I had never been late before. 3 months had passed since my father-in-law left the hospital. I didn't have time to catch my breath because I was so busy. I had to prepare dinner as soon as I got home from work. My husband scorned the dishes I had hurriedly prepared in the limited time available. "What's the deal, Mary? I come home exhausted and you want to have fish? Are you sure?" I apologized. I had to leave the kitchen to clean up my father-in-law, so I made boiled fish. "You should make something that will increase my stamina. I'm not interested in boiled fish." My husband took out a cup of noodles and began to fill it with hot water. As she watched me fall silent, my mother-in-law smirked. Depressed, I went to my father-in-law and dressed for the evening. Then, perhaps noticing my predicament, he inquired worriedly, "Mary, you appear pale. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I've been a little preoccupied with work." "Is that it? I've been hearing a lot of yelling from my wife and Tom lately." "It's entirely my fault. I'm not particularly talented in many areas." "I don't think you look like that." I tried my hardest not to worry my father-in-law by smiling and lying. That's what I only could do to keep my spirits up. The truth was that I'd always wanted to get out of there, but what if I left now? What would happen to my father-in-law? I couldn't just throw it all away after thinking about it. I had days off from work at the end of the year, but that didn't stop me from doing house cleaning. My husband made an outrageous statement on New Year's Eve. "My mother and I are currently on our way to Hawaii." "What? Hawaii?" "I spent a long time discussing it with my mother. We've been discussing it for quite some time." "Wait a second. Think about the situation your father is in." "He is okay with you being here. You're also off work, so you should do something." With a triumphant expression on their faces, my husband and mother-in-law showed me their large carry-on cases. They must have found my perplexity amusing because they tried hard not to laugh. The trip's first day, as they were leaving the house, my husband said simply, "Well, you're going to take care of my father. We're going to Hawaii to unwind. We'll be relaxing in Hawaii, so you'll have to do it yourself." My husband and mother-in-law both laughed as they shut the front door. Something inside of me snapped at that exact moment. "Look after him? What are you on about? Why do I have to do everything by myself as a step-family member? I can't take it any longer. I'm divorcing him when they return." Something exploded in my head, and I resolved to devote myself to caring for my father-in-law until they returned home. I was already planning to divorce, and I decided to do nothing and leave the housework. I made breakfast for my father-in-law as usual the next day and went to his room with a towel to wipe him and change of clothes. My father-in-law approached me with a smile as I did so. "Mary, best wishes for the new year." "Dad, I wish you a happy new year." "What happened to Tom and my wife? Last night they appeared to be in some sort of trouble." "They went to Hawaii." "What? Hawaii?" My father-in-law sighed deeply and looked skeptical. "What? Oh, Dad." "Let's get this party started, shall we? Mary, I apologize for everything." "Wait a second. What are your thoughts?" "I've been able to get out of my bed on my own for a few days now. I've been waiting for the right moment, but I never imagined they'd get it just right." "What exactly do you mean?" My father-in-law then smiled and began to speak slowly. My father-in-law apparently wanted to do something about the fact that I was the only one being pushed around. I asked my mother-in-law and husband to run errands for me, but they ignored me completely. Furthermore, the company's executive director contacted him and reported that my husband, the company's acting president, was doing whatever he pleased. This trip, too, must have been paid for by the company. So my father-in-law contacted a company representative and asked him to monitor my husband's behaviors. Then, his laziness at work was discovered and everyone was furious. My father-in-law was supposed to return to the company as president after the new year. My husband was supposed to return to be an employee, but decided to fire him. The home is also in the name of father-in-law. While they were away, we changed the locks and devised a strategy to keep them out when they returned. I went to the city office to pick up 2 divorce papers while they were there. A week has passed. The front door shook and the intercom rang repeatedly. My husband and mother-in-law, who had just returned from Hawaii, were attempting to open the door. I responded to them via the monitor. "Good to see you back. How was your journey?"
"What the heck, Mary? Please open the door right now because I am unable to do so."
"That's something I can't do. My father-in-law warned me not to open the door."
"What? What are you talking about?"
"Hey, did you have a good time, the trip, with company funds?"
"How did you find out about that? I don't know,"
my husband's expression said. I couldn't help but laugh as I watched their expressions on the monitor. My father-in-law, who was listening to the conversation, then interrupted from the side.
"Oh, you really embezzled my company's money." "Dad, why? You aren't supposed to be able to stand." "I've been able to stand for a few days now thanks to Mary's rehabilitation assistance, and the managing director has told me about your shady attitude at work." "Who is the managing director? No, Dad, no, nothing was done by me." "Give it up, you've been fired. You inept piece of shit. Pack your belongings and leave my office immediately."
Through the monitor, my husband began to complain with tears in his eyes.
"Mary, you won't leave me, will you?"
I snapped back at him as he clutched at me. "What? What are you talking about? Do you know how I felt from the time you decided to live with parents without my permission until today? You took advantage of me, along with Mother, and forced me to take care of your father as a matter of course. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for me?"
"Oh, calm down, Mary. I'm sorry.
"Your apology is worthless. When you left on your trip, I understood it's a waste of time to continue the family with you. I'll live on my own. I don't want a motherfucker like you." At my words, my husband backed away dazzledly. My mother-in-law hurried to support him. The scene was that of a painful mother and son. After that, my father-in-law opened the front door and confronted them with the divorce papers I had received. I had them fill out the divorce papers right then and there, and I kicked them out and locked the door. My husband and mother-in-law pleaded repeatedly,
"Open this door."
But my father-in-law never responded to their pleas. I have not seen them since. Rumor has it that they are both unemployed and cannot afford to rent a room, so they are sleeping in a comic book cafe and working day jobs. It must be a world of difference from the life they had been leading. Well, the punishment is well worth it for them. After the divorce, my father-in-law said to me, "I'm going to hire a housekeeper from now on, so you are free to go." I took him at his words and moved to a place near my work. I am now living a comfortable and fulfilling life. I cannot thank my father-in-law enough for saving me. I am determined to repay him in any way I can.
I'm Scarlett, a 37-year-old, childless, working housewife. Today is our 5th wedding anniversary, and also my husband Everett's birthday, who is the same age as me. Everett is a handsome salesman at a famous company and seems to be quite successful, but he often works late and entertains clients, so we don't see each other much. Our wedding was a simple weekday ceremony with family and a few friends, as we both had weekend jobs and struggled to find a common schedule. Everett strongly wanted it this way. So for our anniversary and his birthday, I asked him to come home early. I took a half day off from work. I bought his favorite Wagyu steak, wine, and cake at a department store and set a stylish table. I waited for Everett to come home. However, despite my insistence on coming home early, he didn't return. I received a single email saying he had urgent work and would stay at the office. Disappointed, but understanding it was work, I cleaned up the dinner and went to bed, feeling a little doubtful since he had said he wasn't that busy. The next morning, I went to work as usual, and my messages to his phone went unread. No response to my calls either. Worried, I called his office and was shocked to learn he had resigned the day before and apparently found a job in a neighboring prefecture. I hadn't heard a word about this. I rushed home and saw his shoes at the entrance. I burst into his room to find him packing his belongings in a suitcase. What's going on? In my surprise, I opened my eyes wide and asked him that. And he said, "What, you already found out?" while clicking his tongue and handing over the divorce papers. What's going on? With cold eyes, he repeated my question and said, "Let's get a divorce." Why? What for? I'm fed up with you not fulfilling your role as a wife. You prioritize work, don't cook, do laundry once a week, and the room is dusty. I don't need a wife like that. Wait a minute. For the past 2 years, I made dinner and waited. But you always said you had eaten and didn't eat it. That's why I stopped cooking. Still, it's a wife's duty to cook and wait. Besides, your cooking is terrible, so I started eating out. At the beginning of our marriage, he used to say my cooking was great. I shuddered at his cold voice and argued that we had agreed when we got married that I would do the laundry and cleaning on my days off, Wednesdays and Thursdays. But he just rolled his eyes and said, "So, I should put up with a dirty room from Friday to Tuesday? That's a joke." What happened to you all of a sudden? I never thought you wouldn't quit your job even after 5 years of marriage. When I got a job offer, I thought it was a good opportunity. A good opportunity to divorce? Everett never complained about my work or housekeeping, and there was no sign of him wanting a divorce. Well, you never noticed how dissatisfied I was. I don't need a wife like that. I rented an apartment near my new job, so I won't be coming back to this room. With that, he pushed me aside, standing in front of the door, and left the house with his suitcase. I stood there dumbfounded, unable to comprehend what had happened. A week later, I attended a high school reunion. I wasn't in the mood to go, but I had already paid the membership fee, and I hadn't been able to contact Everett since then. I was feeling frustrated every day, so I thought it might be a good change of pace. When I went, there were divorced and single mothers among my classmates, and everyone was living strong lives. Until then, I had only hoped for an improvement in my relationship with Everett. But when I thought about it, if we reconciled, I would have to follow him to his new job location. If that were the case, it would be impossible to stay at my current job considering the daily commute, even though it's just in the neighboring prefecture. On the other hand, after working for 17 years since graduating from junior college and receiving a decent salary, it would be almost impossible to earn the same income in the new location. Everett had completely rejected me, and I began to think maybe I should give up. What made it definitive was a phone call from Everett urging me to move. We had been living in a rented apartment, and Everett was the tenant. The lease renewal period was approaching, and it seemed the real estate agent had contacted Everett. "I told them we'd move out in a month, so get rid of everything by then." "I'm still living here, and you didn't consult me at all," I complained, to which he replied, "I'm the one renting it. I don't need to consult you," in a combative tone. I realized that it was really hopeless and said, "Fine, I'll clean up my stuff this weekend or next weekend. Get rid of not just your stuff, but also everything left in my room and the furniture." What? I was ticked off when I heard that. What are you talking about? This room was originally rented by you when you were single, and most of the furniture has been used since then. Most of the other furniture and appliances were bought with your credit card. I'll dispose of the furniture and appliances I mainly used, but naturally, you're responsible for disposing of the rest and covering the disposal costs. When I replied, he hung up. What a stingy man, taking only his precious belongings and leaving all the cleanup to me. This made me determined to divorce him. Over the weekend, I sorted out the closet, reminiscing about the happy times we'd had since we got married. There were many things belonging to both me and Everett. Among them, I found his high school graduation album. Come to think of it, all the friends Everett introduced me to were from after college. I absent-mindedly flipped through his graduation album. That's when I noticed something unexpected. I submitted the divorce papers and reported it to Everett by email. A week later, in the evening, I received a reply from Everett with a picture, which was a marriage registration form for him and a woman. I was astonished and stared at it when he called me. "Did you see it?" "What does this mean?" "It's exactly what it looks like. I just had a wedding ceremony and remarried that woman." You're kidding. She's super beautiful, rich, and has a great personality. She asked me to marry her as soon as we divorced. This is proof. Isn't it amazing? So you were cheating on me while we were married? I'm popular, unlike you, who only has your job going for you. Oh, by the way, her father built us a house on their property, and I transferred to her hometown with his help. It's a mid-sized company, but I'm an executive. Everett must have really wanted to brag about remarrying his rich affair partner, but as he nonchalantly answered, a strong anger rose within me. He said there was a problem with me and divorced me, but it was actually to remarry his affair partner. He said they had been dating for over 2 years. They met at a pub with his coworkers, and she was one of 4 women sitting at the next table. Apparently, when Everett spilled his drink on his clothes, she wiped it off, and that's how they started talking. Man, she's the same age as you and me, but she's super beautiful and looks like she's 10 years younger. She quickly wiped my clothes with a pretty handkerchief. According to Everett, when he took her to a restaurant to thank her, he learned she was a landowner's daughter. She had an arranged marriage at her parents' suggestion, but was troubled by her husband's infidelity. After saying, "I need to fix my bad parts. She's totally different from you," I was instantly attracted to her, he said, and then aggressively pursued her. She started dating Everett without divorcing her husband. Isn't it normal to question the woman who dates 2 men while trying to be devoted to her husband? But Everett, blinded by love, didn't notice. A woman who doesn't support her man is no good. You prioritize work and don't care about your husband. You're not right for me. Huh? You can't stand on your own, so you want me to support you? I couldn't help but yell at him, and Everett seemed annoyed as well, saying, I'm so glad I'm finally free from a woman like you. Stella is the best after all. Stella? Is that her name? Yeah, it's written with the characters for double and flower, like the double cherry blossoms. She was born when the double cherry blossoms were in full bloom. Her parents have a great naming sense. They are true celebrities. As I listened to Everett's voice, enchanted with her unique name, I remembered something. Did you really marry such a wonderful woman? You're not lying? Pretending to say this, Everett's pride was hurt. She's the best wife with a great family background and personality. Look at her elegant beauty. As I expected, he sent me a picture of the 2 of them at their wedding. No doubt, it's her. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. What's so funny? This is proof that we really got married. Sure, it's real. I can't help but laugh, unable to say anything more. Hey, stop laughing. We really got married, and there's a baby in her belly. What? No way. I can't stop laughing. I get it. Losing me must have made you go crazy. Everett interprets my laughter in a way that benefits him, and says dreamily, in 3 months, we'll have a baby girl. She'll definitely be as beautiful as Stella. Well, even if she looks like you instead, she'll still be beautiful. Everett has a sweet, idol-like handsome face. For some reason, he gets a little flustered and says, no, she doesn't need to look like me. Hearing that, I burst out laughing again. Everett says, go crazy on your own, goodbye, and hangs up the phone. Eventually, he'll find out why I was laughing. I can't wait for that day. Afterward, we had some disputes over alimony and property division, but I managed to get millions of dollars from Everett through a lawyer. Everett agreed to pay alimony for his share, not wanting to cause her emotional distress during her pregnancy. 2 years passed without any contact, and then I finally received a heartbreaking email. Please, Scarlett, I beg you, please listen to me. Reluctantly, I answered the phone call that came right after the email. As expected, it was about the child born between him and Stella. Well, kids tend to look like their parents, right? Of course! Who else would they look like? Yeah. Apparently, the baby girl doesn't look like the beautiful Stella at all. I tried saying, she's only 2 years old, right? She'll change a lot as she grows. But he couldn't be convinced, thinking it's strange that there's no resemblance at all. Well, I guess that makes sense. When I asked, holding back laughter, doesn't baby look like you? He suddenly panicked and said loudly, no, she doesn't, but it's okay. It's okay that she doesn't look like me. He secretly did a DNA test to check for Stella's infidelity, but the results confirmed that both Everett and Stella were undoubtedly the child's parents. So there's no doubt that she's your child. Everett wouldn't let the conversation end there. Hey, when I told you 2 years ago that Stella was pregnant, you laughed a lot. Do you know something? Wow, He remembered that. Well, yeah. Actually, Stella and I went to the same high school and were in the same grade. We were never in the same class during those 3 years, so I didn't know much about her, but I remember her being the daughter of a landlord and having a haughty, bad personality. At a class reunion about 2 years ago, the topic of Stella and her plastic surgery came up. Stella, with her single eyelids, small eyes, button nose, and slight overbite, was self-conscious about her looks, and apparently underwent several procedures at a famous cosmetic surgery clinic in New York after high school. She didn't attend the reunion, so I couldn't see her face, but a friend later sent me before and after pictures of her. American cosmetic surgery is amazing. When I told Everett about this, he didn't believe me at first, but then realized that he'd never seen any childhood or graduation album photos of her. Was I deceived? Damn it! Stella acted all meek while we were dating, but it turns out she cheated on me multiple times and got divorced. She's been sued for alimony by several of her ex-husband's wives. I'm going to confront her. Maybe you shouldn't. Huh? Why not? Well, the child doesn't look like you either, right? Usually, girls are said to resemble their fathers. When I said that, Everett was at a loss for words. She can't look like you. You've had plastic surgery too. How did you? When I moved out of the apartment we lived in 2 years ago, I found your high school graduation album. You looked like a completely different person, so I was shocked. After seeing that album, I understood why he never introduced me to his college friends, insisted on having a modest wedding, and only invited a few colleagues from work. Everett probably had plastic surgery while he was in college and was afraid of being exposed by his friends at the time. I don't think there's anything wrong with plastic surgery, but you have to consider that your child might look like your original face. What should I do? What do you mean, what should you do? Just be a normal father. The results showed that the child is definitely yours. With that, I hung up the phone and blocked his number and email address. He's such a narrow-minded man, just because the child's face isn't what he wanted. A year later, a friend with a child the same age as Everett's showed me a picture of her child entering kindergarten, and the child was adorable. The child simply didn't resemble the current Stella or Everett. But according to my friend who became friends with Stella, Stella also expected her child to look like Everett after his surgery. My friend has to listen to her complain almost daily, saying I shouldn't have given birth to such a child. Seriously, they're the worst couple ever. And it seems Everett cheated again, so my friend even got divorce advice from Stella. Everett is such an idiot. If he ends up divorcing Stella, he'll have to pay alimony and child support. Plus, since Stella is a rich lady, there's no telling how much money she could get if she hires a skilled lawyer. Furthermore, according to my friend who became friends with Stella, even the local kids know about her plastic surgery, and her daughter is being excluded at kindergarten, being told, "Your mom is actually ugly." It's a relief that Stella's parents seem to love their granddaughter, but it's really sad for the child. Well, it's none of my business anyway. As for me, I managed to rent an apartment in a convenient location for commuting. Now that the distance is shorter, I can do cleaning and laundry after I get home, and I can spend my days off entirely on my own interests. I've deepened my friendship with a divorced classmate, whom I met again at the reunion, and I'm enjoying a leisurely and fun life.
Lower the wholesale price. At least make it half. Excuse me, who is this? One evening, while having an early dinner with my in-laws and husband, the home phone rang. It was unusual for the phone to ring at this hour. Puzzled, I answered, and the woman on the other end began speaking aggressively. When I asked for clarification, she shrieked, "How dare you ask who I am? You're so rude!" "Well, I don't know who you are if you don't introduce yourself." My in-laws looked worried, and my husband gestured. "Do you want me to take the phone?" I shook my head. I should be able to handle it without hiding behind my protective husband. "Could you please tell me your name?" When I calmly asked again, the woman became hysterical. "I can't believe you don't know who I am. I'm never buying your eggplants again. I'll use cheap imported ones from now on, so goodbye." She didn't identify herself, but I realized who she was when she mentioned eggplants. She was likely the wife of the president of the pickling company I had been dealing with for 15 years, and with whom I had an exclusive contract. With the president gone, she was the only one who would bring up the contract. It's difficult to change things suddenly. We have an exclusive contract, and using locally grown special eggplants is what makes it popular, isn't it? Wouldn't it be bad to use imported ones? Idiot! Consumers don't know the difference between domestic and imported. I can buy imported ones for less than half your price. You're overcharging. At that point, I became angry. Overcharging? My eggplants can't be grown elsewhere, and the price is fair. No way. Anyone can grow eggplants in a home garden. It's a crime to sell such affordable vegetable at such a high price. Be thankful you're not being sued. I'm canceling the contract. What an incredibly rude person. Fueled by anger, I said, "Are you sure about canceling the contract? I won't be responsible for any regrets." "No regrets. I'll make more money using cheaper imported eggplants. I'm relieved to be rid of an overcharging farmer like you. Stay away from us." What was that phone call about? As soon as the call ended, my husband, concerned, asked me, "What happened, Catherine? We heard a woman yelling. Are you okay?" My mother-in-law frowned. I began explaining to my family. I'm Catherine, 49 years old. I am a full-time eggplant farmer for pickles. I've been married to my husband, the eldest son of a rice farming family, for over 20 years. Our daughter lives alone in the city as a college student, and our son just got a job in the city after graduating from college. My son told me, "I'll come back when I find a bride," but I don't rely on that too much. My energetic in-laws and husband, who are approaching 80, are growing rice in their family home, while I and some part-timers are growing eggplants for pickling. The start of eggplant production was 15 years ago. In my hometown, small pickling eggplants have been famous since ancient times. However, these eggplants, while incredibly delicious, were known to be difficult to cultivate. They were weak against diseases and pests and would wither quickly. When I started selling them in small quantities at local direct sales outlets, I was approached by a local pickle company to enter into an exclusive contract. Due to the difficulty of cultivation, the exclusive contract offered a considerably higher price than selling regular eggplants in the market. When I heard about the deal, I was excited and thought it sounded interesting, but I was scared of being sued for breach of contract if the cultivation failed and I ended up in the red. As I was worrying, my husband said, "We have income from rice, so let's give it a try, even if it doesn't work out." And so my challenge began. I continued to try better cultivation methods every year, working diligently for 15 years despite many failures. The scale of the pickling company increased as they started selling online, and the volume of eggplants I delivered grew accordingly. Some companies heard that I was solely responsible for producing pickling eggplants and approached me for business, but I had no intention of expanding my eggplant production further. The exclusive contract was more difficult than I had expected. Although the income was stable with a fixed contract price, I had to deliver a certain amount without fail. I began to think that once my in-laws retired from the front lines of rice farming and my husband and I took over as the main rice farmers until our son took over the family business, it might be okay to quit the exclusive contract. However, I owed a debt of gratitude to the company president, so I continued to deliver the best eggplants every year as long as they wanted them. But last month, the situation changed drastically. At the beginning of last month, the company president collapsed at the factory and never returned. The president passed away last month, right? Hasn't it been 49 days yet? My mother-in-law murmurs. It was so sudden, poor thing. My mother-in-law sympathizes with the president, making a pained face. It's a relief that there's a successor, but he won't be able to return for a while, right? To my husband's words, my father-in-law responds. He was training at another pickling company. The president's son, who was supposed to become the next president, is studying know-how at another pickling company and is in charge of important transactions, so he can't quit right away. While the son is away, the president's secretary and executives were discussing how to keep the business going when the president's wife suddenly interfered, causing turmoil within the company, which I had also briefly heard about. I wonder if the president's wife can't mourn her husband's sudden death or observe a period of mourning. She should have other things to do. Everyone nods in agreement with my mother-in-law's grumbling. Anyway, I'll check the situation. I'd be in trouble if the contract was unilaterally terminated. I called the president's secretary the next day. Did you get a call too, Catherine? I'm so sorry. You seem very tired. Are you okay? The president's secretary, who usually had a lively atmosphere, had a quite downcast voice. It's not okay. I think our company is going to go bankrupt. I've been let go, so I can't help anymore. I'm sorry. What? What do you mean you're being let go? When I asked in surprise, I was told that the president's wife was the cause. The president's wife, without understanding the basics of management, made unreasonable demands on various business partners and repeatedly harassed the employees. Originally, the president's wife was selfish and had a tough personality. The president knew about her personality and never let her be involved in the business. Now that the president is gone, the company is in chaos. The ideal company for the president's wife is one where she only makes money. She only thinks about how to use business partners and employees as cheaply as possible. There's no way a company can run like that. The president's secretary complained and continued. You should give up on them, Catherine. With your eggplants, you'll find new business partners in no time. But we have an exclusive contract, and I was planning to deliver properly at least this year, for the late president's sake. When I added that last part, the president's secretary sighed. I never thought the president would pass away so suddenly. It's really terrible now because of the president's wife. Longtime employees and part-timers are being forced to quit. Older people can't work as much as young people, and regular employees cost money. She's trying to hire only cheap foreign workers. Our pickles taste is our selling point, so there's nothing more valuable than experienced employees. Talent is treasure. Even though there's an exclusive contract, she doesn't understand common sense. It's best to get away. That's how far it went. I was horrified. After the call, I immediately consulted with my husband. Maybe it's time to cut ties, but there's the contract. My husband muttered with a troubled face. Yes, we've exchanged official documents. A few days later, we officially received documents stating that the pickle company was breaking the contract. What is this? Even to an amateur, this looks like nonsense, doesn't it? I thought the secretary was a decent person. The documents were so sloppy that we couldn't help but let out these words. Seeing that, both my husband and I made up our minds. We're not at fault, and luckily, it's before planting season, so it might be a good time to quit. My husband's words made me lean towards quitting, but I was worried about the reduced income over the summer, the part-timers, and various other things. We had struggled and experimented until now, and things were finally going well. I didn't find it amusing to be suddenly forced to quit for such an unreasonable reason. My husband nodded at my words. Let's think about income and the future later. I can't forgive the way she treated you, Catherine. It's their loss. They can't have cheap, low-quality imports bought just because they're cheap and the highest quality products made by us farmers with pride lumped together. That's true. So, my husband and I decided to stop the exclusive contract from this year and not deliver eggplants even if they begged. Then summer came. After I quit the exclusive contract, several pickle companies immediately offered contracts, and my husband and I carefully considered and contracted the best conditions, increasing our income by about 20%. We found a new shipment destinations for the eggplants, and as we worked busily every day, I almost forgot about the rude president's wife. One day, my mother-in-law came to my workplace with an eggplant pickle. Catherine, this is awful, look. It says locally produced, but that's not true, right? My mother-in-law brought this year's eggplant pickles from the pickle company. They said they'd use imported ones, but it says locally produced here. I was surprised when I looked at the package. Let's try it anyway? Upon my mother-in-law's suggestion, my father-in-law, husband, and the part-timers gathered to taste it, and the flavor was completely different than before. There's no way this is locally produced. First of all, it's not bite-sized. They're using large eggplants and pickling them. They're treating consumers like fools. My mother-in-law asserted with a stern face. The taste is strange too. It doesn't feel like it's just gone bad, it's like it's gone rotten. The part-timer also made a harsh comment. Could it be that the president's wife is lying about the imported products being local? But honestly, I thought she might do something like that. A few days later, during dinner, the phone rang again. Hey, can you pretend you sold me your eggplants? The voice didn't introduce herself, but I remembered it. It was the president's wife. I don't remember selling you eggplants, and you're asking me to lie? Yes, if you say so, it'll save our company. Weren't you supposed to never contact me again? That was true, but things have changed. You want money too, right? I'll give you some. It's just a small favor. Her high-handed tone trying to involve me in her crime was unbelievable. No thank you. I refused and hung up, then told my husband and in-laws what had happened. Everyone grinned. My husband in particular seemed pleased. She must have regretted it right away. There's no way your eggplants and those inferior imported ones are the same. Actually, after my mother-in-law brought the pickles, I received calls from various people because I had been the one making the eggplants so far. According to information from the current pickle company, they have received numerous complaints from consumers and even been reported to the authorities. Apparently, the pickle company's in trouble now because they were internally accused of food fraud. Then a few days later, please testify that they were your eggplants. The police might investigate. I recognized the voice which didn't introduce herself from before. This time, it was almost sobbing. Well, I didn't sell them. I hung up again. The next day, a polite call came from a young man claiming to be the president's son. I'd like to meet and apologize, he said, so we decided to meet that afternoon. I asked my in-laws to do the afternoon farm work, and my husband and I waited. A young man, another young man, and a flashy older woman arrived. One was the president's son, the other his current secretary, and the woman was the president's wife. The two men were very polite, but the president's wife had a sullen attitude. Skipping greetings, the son forced the president's wife to bow her head, and they both prostrated themselves. Rubbing their heads on the floor, they apologized. Although I know the situation, is there any way you could supply eggplants again? The son pleaded, but I refused. I'm sorry, but it's impossible. You terminated our exclusive contract. I felt sorry for the son, but considering the president's wife's attitude and that we already had a contract with another company, it was truly impossible. He understood when I told him my honest feelings. Far from it, the president's son seemed to think it was only natural that I would refuse. I guess you're right. I'm very sorry for this. We unilaterally terminated the exclusive contract due to our circumstances, so we'll pay the penalty as initially agreed upon. He easily gave up and began preparing the documents with his secretary. Then, the president's wife widened her eyes. What are you thinking? We've been ripped off until now, so there's no need to pay the penalty. We got caught this time, but we can do better next time. It's the importer's fault that more than half of the imported eggplants were rotten. If we find a cheaper place, it'll be fine. So, you tried to use cheap imports and failed miserably. That's what Catherine told you, right? That you would regret it. When her husband made a sarcastic comment, the two young men said, "Indeed, that's exactly right." They hung their heads. I was concerned about the president's wife's words and asked her again, "By the way you're talking, are you planning to continue labeling the products as locally produced even if you can't get my eggplants?" "Of course. It's more profitable and everyone is doing it." The president's wife showed no remorse and started yelling at me. My husband and I were both taken aback. That's when the president's son lost his temper. "Mom, just be quiet. I only brought you here today to apologize, but I'm fed up with you." Upon being scolded by her son, the president's wife was flustered. "I was just trying to make money. You only think about making money for yourself. That's not how a company should operate. But isn't it a company for making money?" I was irritated by the clueless president's wife. Although on a different scale, I also employ part-time workers. It's not right to think that it's okay to lie as long as you make a profit. I believe that a fair relationship, where both employees and contracted farmers like us can make legitimate profits, is the right one. It's wrong for only one side to profit. At my words, the son, the young secretary, and my husband all nodded. "You're right, Mom. Who doesn't understand that is finished as a person at the company. I'll cut ties with her. However, she needs to take responsibility for ruining Dad's company." Upon hearing her son's declaration of disownment, the president's wife seemed to be affected for the first time. She was so shocked she turned pale and silent. She suddenly became stunned and docile. After that, the case was deemed malicious, involving intentional mislabeling of the origin. It was written in bold letters in the local newspaper that the police had started investigating for fraud, and it became a big news story in the area for a while. The pickle company eventually went bankrupt, and the president's wife was abandoned penniless by her son, fearing prosecution and living in hiding. The president's son and the veteran employees who returned at his call are working hard to deal with the aftermath and establish a new company. I received the penalty for the breach of the exclusive contract, and the matter was settled. Since then, my son has returned and decided to take over the farm. He seems to have found a bride who will happily work on the farm with him. With the happy news, our family's daily life has become very enjoyable.
You are so plain and cheap. My mother-in-law, who has a taste for luxury, repeats her sarcasm every time she meets me. My mother-in-law, who loves first-class goods, says that a woman like me is unworthy of being her son's wife. One day, my mother-in-law, who made fun of the cheap things I wear, poured wine on the dress I was wearing. "Stop it, you cheap thing!" My mother-in-law, who has told me so, later turned pale when she learned the truth. My name is Isabel, a 28-year-old housewife. I married my husband James 2 years ago, and since we have no children yet, we are enjoying a carefree life. Married life with my kind husband is peaceful and smooth. We are even talking about having a baby soon. I am in the midst of such happiness, but my relationship with my mother-in-law, my husband's mother, is not so good. My mother-in-law, Kate, has been very critical of me since we first got married, and even after 2 years of marriage, we have not been able to build a good relationship. I tried to get along with her, but she doesn't seem to want to. My son wanted to get married. I wonder what kind of young lady he would bring. She's very plain or simple. She's not very nice. Perhaps I had made a bad impression on my mother-in-law at our first meeting, but these were the first words she said to me. Perhaps she was trying to tell me that I was not a suitable wife for her son. My parents are a normal working couple. My father an office worker, and my mother a nurse. But my mother-in-law said that as a child of such a family, I did not fit in. I can't believe your mother has to work too. They must have been very poor. My mother-in-law said this with a pitying look in her eyes when she heard about my family. My mother-in-law, who had been a housewife since her marriage and had never worked, laughed and said she had never experienced such hardship. She also proudly told me that she grew up in a wealthy family. From a young age, I always wore things that were nicer than the other people around me. Cheap things don't suit me. That's why I raised my son to know what is the best. I didn't know how to react to my mother-in-law, so I always tried to cover it up with an affectionate smile. It is true that I prefer simple clothes and makeup, which may not suit my mother-in-law, who prefers glamorous things. My mother-in-law always wears fancy, luxury brand clothes, accessories, and makeup. You don't know what good things are, do you? You only know about cheap stuff, don't you? I wonder why my son chose her at all. I raised him to know what is good. After boasting a lot, she always ends up putting me down. Since my husband and I got married, my mother-in-law and I have always been in this kind of situation. However, she is also sarcastic to me when we meet occasionally, and I don't mind it too much because it's something I can just ignore. But my father-in-law and husband are kind to me, and I didn't think it was something I needed to take care of. And there was one more person who welcomed me kindly into my in-laws' home. That was my grandmother-in-law. My father-in-law's mother, who is my husband's grandmother, is a little over 80 years old, but she is still in good health. My husband's parents have 2 houses on a large yacht, and parents-in-laws and grandparents-in-law live in each of them. Both houses are magnificent mansions, and I was very surprised when I saw them for the first time. The land was cheap, and we had a carpenter who built them cheaply. It's not that magnificent. My grandmother-in-law replied with a laugh. My mother-in-law proudly talked about how her house and herself, but in reality, it was largely due to the achievements of my grandparents-in-law. In spite of this, my grandmother-in-law is not snobbish and is very friendly with me. Thanks to that, I didn't mind when my mother-in-law annoyed me. It feels like I have more grandchildren. Well, we don't have any female grandchildren in our family. My grandmother-in-law said so and loved me very much. If possible, I would like to get along with the 3 of us women, but the reality is that it doesn't work out that way. Still, I am glad that I can get along with my grandmother-in-law. Although I do not actively associate with my mother-in-law, I have a good relationship with my grandmother-in-law, like going out for lunch or tea with her. One day, my mother-in-law called me. It's my birthday next month. I've decided to have it at our house this year. Come and celebrate with my son. She invited me to her birthday party. I said I would definitely go. Let me tell you something. We're having a big party this year to celebrate my 60th birthday. All of our relatives and friends will be there. I'd appreciate it if you'd dress appropriately. My son will be fine. But you're not going to be dressed like you always are you? I'll be embarrassed. My mother-in-law told me to come dressed properly and hung up the phone. What my mother-in-law meant by dress appropriately was probably her favorite top-notch brand-name clothes. I was stumped because I didn't have that kind of clothes that would be appropriate for such a party. But when I talked to my husband about it, he told me not to worry about it, and we decided to dress a little more formally. Then came my mother-in-law's birthday. The party was to start in the late afternoon, so my husband and I went to a department store in the morning to pick up a birthday gift for my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, who is a luxury-minded person, would be happy if I got her something luxurious. Also, she wouldn't complain if I told her my husband had picked it out, so in a way, it was easier for us. After we finished picking out the gifts, we had lunch together and went home to get ready to go out to my in-laws. At that time, I received a call from my grandmother-in-law on my phone. "Come to my house now." I explained that I am out of the house and that I am going home now to change. I then told her that I would show up before my mother-in-law's party. "Just come to my house, dressed as you are." My grandmother-in-law says that I don't need to change my clothes and that I should come home right away. I wondered if it was something urgent, so I went to see her. I asked my husband to go home and get changed. We were going to meet at my in-laws later. I went to my grandmother-in-law's house. My grandmother-in-law invited me into her house with a laugh. She was laughing and telling me about my mother-in-law's party. It looks like a really huge party. Various things have been delivered to their house since this morning. From my grandmother-in-law's house, I can see the entrance of my in-laws' house, and I hear all kinds of vendors have been coming and going since this morning. I heard that a big flower arrangement had just arrived, and I could see that my mother-in-law was very enthusiastic about it. My grandmother-in-law said, "My daughter-in-law does a great job," and took me into the sitting room at the back of the house. The room was lined with several Paulina chests. My grandmother-in-law opened one of the chests and took out something from inside. "Isabel, you were told to come dressed properly today, weren't you? I'll give you my dress so you can wear it. This way, she won't be able to complain." My grandmother-in-law said with a smile and held out a dress in front of me. The beautiful and well-maintained dress was her pride and joy. "It's a good one. I don't wear it much anymore. It would be a shame to keep it put away. I thought it would be a good opportunity to give it to you, Isabel." My grandmother-in-law said so, and also took out the accessories that went with the dress from the chest. My grandmother-in-law seemed to have noticed my mother-in-law's comments. So, she recommended that I go in a splendid costume today so that I would not be blamed. I don't know anything about dresses, but from the way that my grandmother-in-law talked, it must be really expensive. When she said she would give it to me, I was puzzled. "I can't accept such a thing. I'm sorry." My grandmother-in-law responded with a kind smile, pushing the dress towards me, saying, "It's okay. It's okay. I know you will take good care of it. That's why I want to give it to you." With these words, my grandmother-in-law begins to dress me. With her brilliant hands, she had me dressed in no time at all. I haven't worn a dress since my 21st birthday. My grandmother-in-law laughed and said, "I see. I have not worn a dress for a long time either. This is a good opportunity, isn't it? Since it's a fancy party?" While we talked about the party, I didn't realize the dressing was over. Then someone came to visit my grandmother-in-law. "I will have this person do your hair and makeup. You will get your hair and makeup done by her." My grandmother-in-law had even taken the trouble to call a hairdresser for today. My grandmother-in-law has been taking care of me for so long. She is my lovely granddaughter. I have to make her look beautiful. Thanks to my grandmother-in-law, I was glamorously dressed. My grandmother-in-law gave me her assurance that my mother-in-law would have no complaints. When I had just finished my preparations, I received a call from my husband that he had arrived at my parents' house. I thanked my grandmother-in-law and decided to go see him. "I'll be there as soon as I change my clothes." My grandmother-in-law sent me off. My husband was surprised to see me in gorgeous clothes, and I entered my parents-in-law's house with him. The hall of my parent-in-law's house was already crowded with my mother-in-law's relatives, and the party had already started. My mother-in-law, dressed in an eye-catching bright red dress, was sitting on the top of the table, smiling happily. "Happy birthday, mother-in-law!" I head over to my mother-in-law to greet her. Then I hand her the gift I have prepared for her. My mother-in-law looks at me as if she is assessing me from top to bottom. Then she takes me out of the hall and brings me toward the kitchen. "You! What a cheap dress! I told you to come properly dressed!" My mother-in-law complained about my dress more rudely than usual, probably because she was already drunk. The next moment, she splashed a wine glass she was holding onto my dress. The stain on my dress spread rapidly. "You know, it's because you forced yourself to wear a dress. Why don't you wear something with a pattern instead of such a plain one? You really have no taste. That's why I hate people from poor families." My mother-in-law, not caring about my dismay at having ruined my dress, spoke one insulting word after another. She told me to go home because she would not allow me to attend the party in a cheap dress. "This is your mother's." I was so shocked that it was all I could manage to mutter. I was so sad that my grandmother-in-law had prepared all these things for me with all her heart, and now they had all been ruined at once. Whose mother? What about her? What are you talking about? Anyway, I don't want you here today. Just leave my son and go home. My mother-in-law, who did not understand the situation, quickly tried to get me to leave. At that moment, I heard my grandmother-in-law's voice behind me. "What's so cheap? Do you mean my dress?" I turned around and there she was. She came to me as I had tears welling up. "Oh my God, it's terrible." My grandmother-in-law looked at the stain on my dress and muttered. I was so sorry that all I could do was to apologize to my grandmother-in-law, and I just turned my head down and mouthed an apology. My grandmother said, "It's all right," and dabbed the spot where the wine had been spilled with a handkerchief. My mother-in-law, who was watching this scene, had sobered up and looked very pale. "If you do this way, the stain won't spread. I'll have the stain remover to take care of the rest." My grandmother-in-law looked at me with kind eyes and then turned back to my mother-in-law. "Which dress do you mean by cheap one? This is one I had made a long time ago. It must have cost several $1,000,000. The fabric and the tailoring are first class, just like you love." My mother-in-law rolled her eyes as soon as my grandmother-in-law mentioned the price. I was also surprised that it was so expensive, although I had heard that it was a good one. My grandmother-in-law explained the value of the dress to my mother-in-law in a sarcastic tone. My mother-in-law had soiled a very expensive dress. "I'm sorry. I didn't think it was that expensive." My mother-in-law, who seemed even more upset than I was, replied as if she were trying to squeeze out a response. My grandmother-in-law blamed my mother-in-law even more. How can a person who doesn't know the value of things make fun of other people? You, who only dances around with fancy things and names, you don't know what's really good, do you? You're disgusting. You embarrass me. My mother-in-law, who seemed to have sobered up completely, could not refute my grandmother-in-law's words, and just looked down. People who know what they're talking about understand. You, who only have cheap dresses, don't understand. If you ask me, you are new money, and you have no taste. My grandmother-in-law was extremely sarcastic with my mother-in-law. She said the same things that my mother-in-law used to say to me. My mother-in-law must have felt embarrassed because her face turned bright red. She was just biting her lip in silence. Then, my grandmother-in-law began to lecture my mother-in-law about her attitude towards me. What kind of a thing is it to snub a daughter-in-law who has come from another family? I felt sorry for my mother-in-law, who looked like she was about to cry, and listened to her silently. I'll leave it at that. Me and Isabel won't be attending anymore. Have a good time. After she finished lecturing my mother-in-law for a while, my grandmother-in-law let her go. Her bright red dress, which she had prepared with great enthusiasm for the occasion, looked ridiculous in this situation. Wait here. I have a change of clothes for you at home. I changed into my own clothes, which my grandmother-in-law went to get for me, and went back to my grandmother-in-law's house. My husband also came with me. My husband seemed to be very angry when he heard this story from my grandmother-in-law. My grandparents-in-law, my husband, and I left my parent-in-law's house and went to dinner with just the four of us. We had a good time without worrying about my mother-in-law. After that, my mother-in-law was lectured again by my husband and my grandmother-in-law, who were furious, and they told her not to approach me. She was also restricted from spending money freely. It seems that this happened because of my grandmother-in-law's words that my mother-in-law should learn modesty. At that time, my mother-in-law's face was so pale that I could not look at her. Furthermore, my grandmother-in-law declared at that time that she would give me all her dresses, jewelry, and other valuable things. It doesn't make sense to let someone who doesn't know the value have them, you know. She was very sarcastic with my mother-in-law until the end. I had tried not to say much about it before, but it seems she disliked my mother-in-law's taste for luxury. Later, with a mischievous smile, my grandmother-in-law confessed to me. The wine-stained dress came back to me clean. I was really happy and relieved from the bottom of my heart. I still don't understand the quality of things yet, but I have learned a lot from my grandmother-in-law, who accepted me.